Hi, today we're going to talk about the Native American cultures in early America. As we talked about yesterday, the first people in the Americas came across a land bridge called the Bering Land Bridge, and they came through way of Asia, Siberia, into the Americas. One of the tribes that lived in the Americas was called the Anasazi. They lived around 1500 BC and lived in the four corners of the United States. Does anybody know what that states that includes? They were farmers and skilled basket makers. They built pueblos from, what would you say they built them from? And looking in your book, how many people could live in one house? They also had kivas that were, looking in your book, find out what a kiva is. The rituals focused on life-giving forces of the rain and the maize. After 1300 AD, they abandoned their villages. Why would that happen? Another civilization is called the Hopewell. They lived 1000 BC. They lived along the Mississippi and Lower Missouri River in states such as Ohio. Remember, those are two rivers. Their population was supported with agriculture and trading. They built hundreds of mounds for religious ceremonies. This is a map of the area where the mound building peoples lived. Not only were there Hopewells, there were Adinas, not that I'm saying that right, Olmecs. The Hopewells were the second of the three mound-building civilizations. They were the strongest civilization for 500 years and grew in the middle of the United States. Hopewell trade reached from the Atlantic Ocean to the Great Plains and from Lake Superior to the Gulf of Mexico. Here's a picture of one of the mounds that the Hopewell were known for. Two other tribes, the Inuit and the Aleut, were settled in Alaska. They had igloos and they built totem poles. Does anybody know what a totem pole is and what it was used for? They had feasts called potlatches. They gave away most of their belongings as gifts to increase their social importance. Three other civilizations were the Pomo, Hupa, and Yurok. They lived in California. There, food sources were so plentiful that farming was not even necessary. Families lived in groups of 50 to 300 people. And it was a little confusing. More than 100 languages were spoken. Here's an example of one of the tribe's dwellings and a Hupa citizen. These tribes we're familiar with. The Paiute, the Shoshone, the Ute. They lived in the east of the Sierra Nevada mountains, a very dry region. They grew maize, beans, and squash. They had religious ceremonies, and guess what? To bring rain. Some towns had 1,000 residents. As you can see by the map, we're very close to Death Valley, and we're not exactly a very wet region. Speaking of the Shoshone, there is a very famous Shoshone person that we want to talk about. And as you can see, her name was Sacagawea. She lived in the 1790s to the 1812s, or maybe 84. They just don't know when she died. And this is a long time after the civilization in the first time of America. In the 1800s, she was a 12-year-old girl. She was adopted by another tribe. And then she was sold as a slave to a Frenchman named Charbonneau. and he was hired by Lewis and Clark as a steersman. Sacagawea ended up to be a guide and interpreter. She was known for her great courage and her great intelligence, which we will talk about later. Now, Shoshone were part of the Great Plains Indians as well as other tribes. As you can see, the Great Plains Indians lived in the middle part of America. They were indigenous people, and their colorful equestrian culture and resistance to the white domination have made the Plains Indians an archetype in literature and art for the American Indians everywhere. Plains Indians are usually divided into two groups. You got the first group. It's fully nomadic. They followed vast herds of buffalo. And those groups were the Blackfoot, the Arapaho, Cheyenne, Comanche, Crow, and as you can see, the others listed there. And of course, the Shoshone. Now, the second group stayed more at home. They raised crops and lived in villages. The Arikara, who, a very famous scout, was part of Arikara. Nez Perce, we know about them. Omaha, Osage, Pawnee, and others, as you can see listed. The Iroquois were one of the strongest civilizations back in early America. They had built dwellings called longhouses that could house like 1,000 people. One of their very famous chiefs was Powhatan, or maybe we call him Powhatan. Now, let's talk about what all the civilizations shared. What were their shared beliefs? And also, what was their differences?